This is A New Angle, a show about cool people doing awesome things in and around Montana. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Hey folks, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. You might not expect it, but there is abundant international trade happening right here in Montana. Today is the third episode in our Voices of Trade series. To mark the Montana World Trade Center's World Trade and Investment Day, we've been exploring the various opportunities and challenges facing Montana firms doing business internationally. Today, we are speaking with Chris Tilleman, founder of TeraDact, a data security company serving clients around the world.
The data itself is what's of value and who you are. And sure, that could be used to create a request to get a credit card in your name as a bad actor. But sometimes just knowing that who you are and these things that define you, whether it's your health metrics or your social security, remains your control and your capability.
Also joining me is Brigitta Miranda-Freer, Executive Director of the Montana World Trade Center. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So tell us, where did you grow up and what did your parents do?
I'm originally from Havre, Montana, and my family grew up as a set of entrepreneurs up in the High Line. And I graduated out of high school there in '99. I'm a graduate of the University of Montana and the College of Business. I've also had a number of siblings and cousins and nieces and nephews all involved with it. And my sister specifically is the dean of the College of Business. And also my father graduated from here too.
So give us a little career summary. You've had a prolific set of experiences in the tech sector. How would you characterize your professional career so far?
Oh, it's been fantastic. In fact, one of the things I really appreciated about going to the University of Montana and the College of Business is it gave me a lot of opportunities that I would not have necessarily had I not come here. I came here for a master's in accounting that took me out to California. I lived in LA and the Bay Area for a number of years, about a decade. And during that time, I got to work for a number of large tech providers and tech vendors, working in the licensing and software space.
Before we get into the specifics of TeraDact, just give us the state of play with data security and why should business owners, individuals be investing in data security?
Absolutely. So one of the things that has come about in this world is the data itself that we generate. And whether you're a car dealership, an insurance company, a hospital, even a university, the data itself tends to be the thing of real value that we generate. We have all these business processes and processes of operation, but at the end of the day, we drive business data, and that could be everything from a customer to how we make something, to how we do something. And the information contained therein of the data is the thing that we create of value.
Okay.
And this may be a very common story if you start talking about AI, because everyone wants to get access to the data. It's the same story for bad actors out there. Everyone wants access to the data. And so there's going to be a natural inclination for bad actors to try to come for your data, the thing of value that you produce. And then what we're ultimately looking to do is provide a set of tools that can help the average consumer, the small business owner, the large governmental entity, to the largest enterprise, better control and provide access to that data while still not losing control of it and letting it walk out the door.
So I think the thing that easily comes to most people's minds is the thought of an individual agent as a hacker and then wreaking havoc in a political campaign or embarrassing an executive or something like that. But it's probably much more sophisticated and organized than that.
Yes. And truly at like the highest level, there are state-sponsored actors out there, whether it's North Korea, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's allies, whether it's partners and friends. We all look at each other and look at what everyone else is doing to try to figure it out. And that's just at a governmental level, but it can also happen between organizations.
I think something that is worth surfacing here in this conversation too, when we talk about data privacy and the importance of how we treat our data, it's not just because of what a nefarious actor could do. It's also because this information, individuals should have the right to be forgotten, the right to correct when their data is somewhere where it shouldn't be. It's more than just guarding against a nefarious actor. It's that overarching fairness about when, me, When can my data be used and who uses it?
That's a really good point. There is a need for privacy, which is something that Montana we take very personal. In fact, it's been embedded into our state constitution. But then that even applies to whether it's a Montana individual, someone in Europe, as you'd reference with GDPR, the Global Data Protection Regulation. But there are a number of these regulations that really define, once again, what do we do with the data and this thing of value that we generate, whether it's a state government, a local government, an enterprise, or a small business. How do we handle this data and handle it in a fair and give it an honest treatment as we work through this data?
Could you maybe give an example of how you could help a company or an organization like a governmental entity make sure they're complying with something like EU General Data Protection Regulation or the myriad other regs that exist around the globe?
Absolutely. So we have three main offerings amongst others that we're currently developing, but the primary one is called tokenization. And so this is not like a Bitcoin, but it could be analogous to that. It is if you remember going to the arcade in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
You used to put a quarter in the machine and you get a token back. The token, while not a quarter, was representative of a quarter in the amount of time you could go play a video game. Tokenization is the same concept, but instead of putting a quarter in, you put in a piece of data. And then that data will then get represented by a token that is no longer tied to any one specific individual, but you know it is akin to a social security number or citizen ID or an insurance policy or anything deemed of value. And you can still work with the data, you can still run analytics without ever actually exposing the underlying sensitive aspects of that individual because you put a token in lieu of their sensitive information.
Some way of de-identifying a data set in a way. And so that being one of your products, like what is your unique selling proposition in that market?
I'll give an example of a current customer we have. In this case, this customer has a bunch of sensitive data that's around PHI, personally identifiable health information. Okay. And in that case, they are actually taking it to another location. It's going up into the cloud, outside of their control, outside of their data center. They are tokenizing all the sensitive aspects of that personal health information. So that way analytics can still be ran, they can still see it, they can act upon the data. But if the data were ever to be lost, either through negligence and a data leak or a bad actor or any other reason, they would actually lose nothing of value. And so in that case, they would have a data breach, but they would not have to notify because there's nothing identifiable to an individual. Rules like GDPR or California Consumer Protection Act, those have certain notification requirements when you lose an individual's information. The ability to then take redaction and tokenization and then full-on encryption, which is our third product, Secrets, gives us a multi-layered approach to protecting sensitive data.
So who's your typical client then?
Right now, it's mostly governmental, but we will actually be releasing a business-to-consumer portal and actually going after the individual market while we continue to explore with governments and large enterprise.
So government needs data security and protection for a variety of reasons. We described tokenization, right? They have a lot of information about their citizens they want to analyze, but also depersonalize for a variety of reasons. So talk about redaction. We're probably familiar, most people are familiar with looking at a redacted document. You see those black lines over the stuff you want to read, right, typically. Why is redaction important? How do you do it at scale? And why is an AI agent an important piece of the puzzle?
I think a really great example was one that just happened, which was the release of the JFK file. So they released the entire files in their entirety, unredacted. Turns out some of those people are still alive, which included those people's names, addresses, social security numbers, incomes, everything. And they just kicked it to the whole wide world, and then they didn't actually look to actually address this issue until 5 days after everything had been released.
Interesting.
Yeah,
a little sloppy.
A little sloppy. I think they assumed everyone was gone from 1963. They released about 34,000 different individual PDFs. And so when it comes to redaction, this is like you said, a fairly common thing. We'll see like black lines on a piece of paper. Oftentimes it's a replica, so it's been black lined, then photocopied, then released to make it so you can't actually see what's underneath that black line. But here's the challenge when it comes to redaction, is it is, one, a very strenuous activity. And then when you think about this example of 34,000 different PDFs, each of 10 to 100 different pages, you run into the scaling issue. And so if I hand to you 10 pages to redact, you're going to knock it out of the park. You're going to read all 10 pages.
I mean, I don't know if I'd knock it out of the park, but it would take me a chunk of time.
It would take you a chunk of time. But when I hand you 10,000 pages, you're actually going to get very loose and very sloppy, and you're going to quit paying attention because you actually have an information overload issue as you review the information and contextually have to think about what's in that document. And that's where agentic AI comes into play, which is a very hot term as it goes to AI.
Define agentic. That might be a word that listeners haven't associated with AI before.
Agent-based AI.
Okay.
Up until the past year, a lot of AI conversations have been around platform-based AI solutions that can grab broad swaths of data, give you some information back. They can do generative AI where it will generate ideas and topics and conversations. Agentic AI is the actual application of the AI to then do something with its knowledge base now and to go off and do an activity. And this could be tokenization, it could be redaction, it could be encryption, or it could be go write the next big movie or the next big play and then generate some script.
Okay, so back to AI in redaction, I think we can see why having an agentic AI would be very useful.
Exactly. I often take this conversation into two places. Let's let computers do things that they're really good at, which is scale and repeatability. And let's have humans do what they're really good at. And let's look at the context of a file and read between the lines of what could be important. And really, when you put the two together, you get a better outcome than either one working by themselves. And often agent AI tends to work hand in hand with a human individual to really augment their ability to go out and scale and do multiple activities at the same time. So in this case of redaction, with the 10,000 pages that got released for the JFK files, you could have 3 people look at it instead of 3,000 to make sure you actually remove all the sensitive information.
So who gets hauled before Congress when something goes wrong in an instance like this, if it's an AI that's doing the redaction?
In the case of an AI doing the redaction, it would still be the organizations who deploy it, who set the rule sets, who train it, and then ultimately feed it along, as well as maybe the vendor or provider.
Part of the reason that when Justin and I were talking about this brief series, introducing people to Montana's international trade landscape, it's bringing in companies that are selling products, selling services overseas. And a lot of times people don't understand that there are service exports. And you're a great example of that. You've got a software as a service kind of company. And I think last year, the year before, you'll talk to us about this great sort of foray into international that you had.
And so often, Montana is a net importer of goods, services, and then we send our dollars outside the state. Even our interaction with some other clients pulls dollars from other spots in the U.S. and brings them right here to Montana. Now, going into the broader context of international trade and talking about our agentic AI for redaction, the way this story starts out is we have a number of local employees, but we also had a global footprint for our employees. And so we had a couple developers based out of Europe, but also both those players are very integral to the success of our company. The attorney developer became aware of an RFI, which is a request for information. Generally, governments tend to release these when they don't actually know the landscape of what they're looking to dip their toes into. And so this RFI came out that was asking for information around AI-based redaction. The reason why this RFI came out is because the United Kingdom has an organization called ACE, Advanced Computing Environment. And ACE was developed to go look for other ways to make their government and their employees as efficient as possible, so that way they could have more individuals doing productive work across the entire landscape. And they settled on AI-based redaction for their police forces and national forces. And so this RFI comes out asking for different groups to propose and make suggestions and talk about what they do, present a little bit, and then ultimately they go quiet.
So the somewhat unique opportunity presents itself in the UK. From your vantage point in Montana, what makes you think that's a great place to start? We're going to jump on that opportunity.
So one, we were aware of it in the first place. When you participate in an RFI, you actually get to see who all the other participants are.
Okay.
In this case, there was 5 of us. It was all UK-based entities and one US firm. There's often a term that's used called American exceptionalism, where we think, we're America, we're great. Let's just go wing it. Let's see if we can pull this off. The other more politically correct term for this now is called American dynamism. And it's being really pushed by 2 large venture firms, one called Founders Fund, which is Peter Thiel. The other one is A16Z, Anderson Horowitz. And they're taking the stance that, once again, America's great, but let's help out the rest of the world and our allies and partners and drive this. And so it's that same spirit. And so we went into the RFI. We gave some information. Then often what will happen is the government will go really quiet. And they'll say, here were the 5 of you who presented. You guys will at least now know you're all in the same marketplace together. And then they will just then go quiet for some amount of time. In this case, though, they actually came back really quickly and said, okay, let's do an RFP, request for proposal.
That's the next step in this process.
We all apply. And then they say, this time, though, we're going to test you. We want to see who does this the best. And so they gave us a sample project. It was a police report. And they said, okay, we're going to give this to you 30 minutes before the meeting. You get 30 minutes to look at the doc, run it through your tool, hand it back to us. In our case, once again, we really pushed our American grit and know-how. And we said, well, it's only 27 pages. It's a Word doc. It doesn't even have pictures. Like, this isn't hard at all. Let's make this harder. Let's make it 2,700 pages. And let's turn it into Farsi. And so we showed up with our document for the presentation and said, yeah, your guys' sample is too easy. And so we were chosen as the only American provider of this.
Nice.
That's excellent.
Okay. We'll be back to my conversation with Chris Tilleman after this short break. A New Angle is proudly presented by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. This show does not happen without these pillars of our community, and I'm so grateful for their support and encouragement. And speaking of support, have you checked out our new website yet? anewanglepodcast.com. There you can support our show directly with a variety of subscription options. Subscribers get access to bonus episodes, additional segments, writings, and other benefits. So check it out at anewanglepodcast.com.
Hi, this is Kelly Webster, Chief of Staff at the University of Montana, and you're listening to A New Angle.
Welcome back to A New Angle. I'm speaking with Chris Tilleman, founder of TeraDact, a data security company serving clients worldwide.
You know, I wanted to comment on something that Justin said. He basically was saying, why you, this company from Montana? But I kind of want to turn that on its head, especially when you're talking about software as a service kind of product. This is a more geographically agnostic business model. So like he can be here in Montana. And of course, you've got some experts and some folks on the ground, but you're not subject to some of the same restrictions that a company that is producing a good and must ship it to market is subject to. So it's one of the reasons why this particular industry is so important for our state, and it's going to grow in importance too, whether we're talking about just driving our economy or driving our exports.
Absolutely. And further along with those points of, once again, why not us or why not here? When it comes to these types of companies and generally the employees and contractors associated around technology and coding and development, they want to live somewhere nice.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to live in the mountains with a very educated populace and hardworking populace and a number of other factors that really drive, like you can live anywhere and work anywhere and do anything. Why not live somewhere you like it?
We're living through this moment of just political uncertainty, geopolitical uncertainty around the world. People talking a lot about tariffs. Do tariffs apply to a service? How does sort of what's happening with geopolitics right now affect your business, if at all?
Starting prior to the tariffs conversation, the geopolitical conversation, one of the things that we found out by being this organization is, one, there's always intricacies when you work with another country, another place, another set of people. First thing we found out, one, we're not cops. So we weren't in the club. We aren't ex-military. We're not ex-national forces to really be a part of that conversation. And two, we're not British. And so there was also a little bit of cultural divide there that we end up having to overcome. Part of how you do that is you create a local entity, you hire local individuals, and that's what we ended up doing to overcome that certain limitation. So in this case, we hired a number of individuals who are former police, former cybersecurity, former special intelligence in the United Kingdom to really take a top-level view. And then we also hired a much more group of technical individuals to really help deploy. So it's only Europeans talking to Europeans and specifically UK people talking to UK people. But then once you actually start talking about post-election, and now there's been all this conversation of geopolitics and tariffs and this whole portion of the conversation, we're very fortunate that software has been basically excluded from all tariffs conversations back and forth with every entity, whether it's the U.S. and China, U.S. and Europe back to us. The rule is don't touch our software. Yeah, I also really equate to the U.S.'s rule of don't touch my boats. Basically, anytime someone touches their boats or their software or some other key industries, the U.S. acts and moves.
And I think, like, to your point, Justin, as we embark and deepen and dig in on the whole trade war thing, maybe it starts with tariffs and throwing that around. The concern is that translates into a long-term riff with our long-term customers around the world. And okay, we may have started this with lobbing tariff bombs, but now maybe those countries are going to want to dig in their heels and set up a new framework for how to deal with SaaS products being imported into their country. Maybe suddenly they're trying to do something in a retaliatory way. Again, this is a common theme now. We need to be careful.
I will agree. There's often a term that high tide rises all boats. Tariffs can be the tide that pulls all boats down. And especially, once again, to retaliatory aspects. Like, it could be very damaging on both sides of that conversation. And I will say with our organization, we've actually gone international before we've gone domestic. And part of this is, one, we made reference earlier to GDPR, Global Data Privacy Regulation. It is the grandfather of data security, data privacy acts. But then two, within the U.S., there's no federal mandate here for protecting sensitive data.
Yeah, not yet. Yeah.
There's a patchwork of about 147 different city, county, and state regulations. California is different from Oregon's. You made reference to the right to be forgotten. Oregon allows for the right to be forgotten. California does not. And so it's a bit tumultuous of a space. And then because there's been no real enforcement of these rules yet, no one has an incentive to move and actually make the processes and protection of the data a primary item that they want to go worry about and go fix or protect.
Yeah, the EU is way ahead of the United States and most other places in the world on that front, yeah.
But they even took 10, 15
Yeah,
years
they
before
did.
they actually even started enforcing it.
Yeah.
But then they also started enforcing it in the same way that a lot of other countries have done, is against foreign corporations first.
So you start out with this deal in the UK, a government and a regime that has a similar set of values around citizenship and the relationship between the government and citizens. As you move into other markets, you're dealing with governments, you're dealing with law enforcement, military, some areas where redaction is not uncontroversial. Does your company, does TeraDact have a view of what governments should and shouldn't do in that space, or do you present yourself as agnostic actors? We'll do whatever your priorities are.
No, so prime example, there was actually a security and policing conference outside of London just 3 weeks ago. A number of foreign entities were there, and they're actually a bit wrangled by the Home Office, their version of their intelligence apparatus. And our individuals in the UK had conversations with them. Norway shows up. Norway, pretty easy to have that conversation.
Okay.
Like, here's our tech, here's how it can help you, how it can make life easier as you're thinking about how you protect sensitive data and how you share things. Very easy conversation. The more awkward one that happened, though, was Serbia shows up. There's maybe some protests going on in Serbia right now where the government and the people are not necessarily well aligned, and they were very interested in our tech. And we will make sure that, one, our tech is used in a positive manner, but then we also have to always make sure that we abide by any ITAR rules that are U.S. based around the export of technology. And what is an okay export one day may not be the next day based on the actions of those governments and their people. And you have to be ethical in how you approach those things. And once again, talking about the ITAR Act, you also have to be aware of what happens to your product down the line. So just because I sell to someone in Italy, but ultimately ends up going into a restricted zone, let's say Russia, I then become responsible for that. Luckily, we do build in controls, and not like controls about AI going wild, but controls about how you use our tech and how it can be deployed and applied.
How do you protect your own intellectual property?
It is very difficult. So there are a few key things. One, when it comes to particularly stuff in AI, right now it is just the Wild West. So I think I made reference earlier to the RFI for the AI action plan. In there, we filed our response. One of the things we actually talked about was the enforcement of intellectual property. And that is a good spot for the U.S. to spend its resources to make sure that, one, good tech goes to our citizens, but then two, when you get something, you know it actually came from the appropriate purveyor of that resource. Right now, both patents are increasingly being claimed by outside entities and individuals from outside the U.S., trademarking as well. And then also, if you already have a trademark, like we have our TeraDact and we have a shield, that you may have someone who tries to copy that logo and or present themselves as you because you win an opportunity that creates a lot of traction. And so you just have to make sure you're very diligent, very controlled, particularly with our product, who gets access to it. We have a number of people who try to get free access to our product, and we actually keep a very tight control on who has access to that.
And you probably registered in the UK market, right? You got your IP squared away before okay.
We're in the UK as an entity with our own holdings, and we have UK-based attorneys and accountants. On top of that, though, I was also going to talk about access to our systems. If you want to share some with your viewers, we can give 3 months free to our online portal, and using this tool, do redaction or tokenization or encryption, whether it's unstructured documents like Word, PDF, images, video or audio, or structured data sets like large databases, Excel, CSV.
We've been a little in the weeds with TeraDact and what you do, and that's great, illuminating. For a listener who maybe doesn't have a sophisticated view of data privacy, data security, what's the thing that keeps a guy like you up at night when it comes to the future of risk in this space?
Particular, obviously I made reference earlier to bad actors, and they are a part of that story, but so often it's just haphazard sharing of our data. Prime example I like to give a lot last year was Toyota sent out 3 notifications to former Toyota owners that they lost your data 3 times from the cloud. They had an unprotected portal that leaked everything out, whether you're if you're a Toyota financial customer. And it's, once again, the data itself is what's of value and who you are. And sure, that could be used to create a request to get a credit card in your name as a bad actor. But sometimes just knowing that who you are and these things that define you, whether it's your health metrics or your Social Security, remains your control and your capability. And so it's about raising the knowledge and expertise around this and making sure that everyone takes that as a thing of real value. And I think that's something that culturally the U.S. does not necessarily view what identifies us as valuable.
And do you have a line item in your contract saying you will not send anything to Jeffrey Goldberg?
Not yet, but we probably should. But if you are going to do things, you should probably check out our secrets product, because we can create one-time viewable sharing of information, and whether it's a message or a secure passcode, passkey.
You've already got an app for that.
I've already got an app for it. I know. If I send stuff, I tend to send it by that, because it's a system we control with heavy encryption that then we actually validate that data is forever gone. And Signal may not necessarily do that given the nature of the product, but it is amazing how it proliferated out there by people feeling like it's secure.
Indeed. Chris, it's been great to catch up, learning more about this venture and the important work that you do, and all the interesting, it's like this great mix of international trade, business, and sort of...
intrigue.
Intrigue. Yeah, that's the word that comes to
Right?
mind. And it's good to know that we have talented and passionate Montanans right in the middle of it.
Definitely. No, thank you for having me.
And if listeners want to learn more about TeraDact, where would you point them online?
TeraDact.com.
Okay. Chris, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Brigitta, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to A New Angle. If you like what we do and want to support us directly, please consider a subscription at anewanglepodcast.com. A New Angle is recorded at Studio 49, a generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. Our presenting sponsors are First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Keely Larson is our producer. Maddie Jordan is our production assistant. VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music. And Jeff Meese is our master of all things sound. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.